This division, I don't know. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. I mean, the Jaguars are going to win it. At least I know that. Grossi. And today we are going to be talking about the AFC South, breaking down each team, what they did in the offseason, talking about each floor and ceiling for each team, and then ranking them at the very end of where I think the division is going to shake out. And today the AFC South is up on deck. And this is a weird division, just because there are weaker teams here, but there are rebuilding teams. You have brand new QBs all over, except for the Titans, though technically they do have new QBs. One just eats mayonnaise. But he's not starting, so he doesn't count. But it seems that the Jaguars are clearing away the front runners of this division. The Titans, they should have won the division last year, but they went on a historic losing streak, of course, after beating the Packers. So glad that we were the last ones that they beat. But the point is that it's going to be an interesting division just because those rebuilding teams, we're going to see like who is set up for the future. The Texans, for example, like took some big swings. Are the Titans, when they went out and got DeAndre Hopkins, are they going to make a difference? So we got a lot to talk about. Let's get started. Starting off with the Houston Texans. And I got to give the Texans credit because they sat there at the draft and I feel like they were just trying to do anything they could.
I'm doing something!
And kudos to them. The Texans have been in this weird spot. They had their franchise QB in Deshaun Watson. They had their franchise wide receiver in DeAndre Hopkins. They had their franchise defensive player in J.J. Watt. Are we seeing the pattern here? The point is that none of them are on the team anymore, and they have been rebuilding. They got a bag for Deshaun Watson from the Cleveland Browns, and this draft, they decided to take some big swings. They drafted C.J. Stroud to hopefully be their franchise QB, and then they said, you know what? Let's trade right on back and get Will Anderson. Maybe he could be a staple of that defense. Now, I respect the hell out of that because it's given their fans something to be hopeful for, and in a weak division, all it takes is them getting a little bit of a foothold and they would be okay. For example, Pierce, their running back, I loved what he did last season. I think he can be a really good player. And under the direction of DeMeco Ryans, I think they can be pretty darn good this year. Now, I still think they're going to go through a bunch of growing pains. And again, they have a rookie QB. You saw how it was for CJ Stroud. So I don't think they're going to win a ton of games, but they could be heading in the right direction. Now, on top of an easy division, their schedule, not the worst, but they do have some teams they are going to play that are going to be challenging. They do have the Ravens, they have the Bengals, they have the Jets, which is going to be pretty rough, and the Steelers defense might give them some problems. But besides that, they really just have the 2 games against the Jaguars to really worry about. So if the Texans start off pretty hot, they could have a decent season. I have their floor at 6-11 just because there is a lot of new there in Houston, and I have their ceiling all the way up at 8-9. Now, I don't think they're going to necessarily be a winning team just yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if they have a 9-8 record just because CJ Stroud might be overperforming or just picking up on things a little bit quicker. They do have Pierce, so that run game could be good, but overall, I think what fans need to see from the Texans this year is progress, and if they see that, well, then it may be brighter skies are ahead. Then you got the Indianapolis Colts. Oh, Colts fans, my friends, I'm sorry. Listen, this is how I imagine the conversation between Jim Irsay and Jonathan Taylor went.
Could you pay me in advance?
You serious?
It then went from we're not trading him to, oh, you could try and find a trade partner, to then apparently asking for Jalen Waddle in exchange for Jonathan Taylor. And where it has ended up with is Jonathan Taylor will be on the PUP list, so the first 4 games of the season he will not be playing. Now, the Colts still could trade him. Apparently the Packers are interested, but I don't know if this relationship can be fixed. Chris Ballard has come out and said, listen, we only won 4 games last season as to why Jonathan Taylor hasn't gotten this major extension. And I think the Colts think that they can play without him. They're like, oh, look, Andrew Luck didn't need a running back. No, he needed an offensive line. But Anthony Richardson, I think, is a raw prospect. That's what everybody agrees upon. But the flashes that you see of him, I think can wind up winning them some games. On top of that, being in a weaker division, I think has given a little bit of leeway to Richardson because let's be very honest, the Colts drafted for need. They needed to go and get him. And the best thing for Richardson, in my opinion, would be to sit for a while, develop, learn behind somebody. But the Colts really can't afford to do that right now. Their offensive line is not as good as it was. We don't know what's going on with Jonathan Taylor. That defense has not been as good. And so, yeah, the Colts are just a weird team. It's going to come down to, can Anthony Richardson learn how to play in the NFL quickly? And if so, they have some upside. And so because of that, and I believe in their upside a little bit more just because of Anthony Richardson, while I could see them only winning 4 or 5 games, I do have their floor at 7-10. It's just a little bit higher, and I think I might be overrating them a little bit, but I just got a feeling that Anthony Richardson is going to make up for what is lacking. Now, I will say if Jonathan Taylor winds up coming back and playing this year for the Colts, I really believe in that 7-10 floor. I do have their ceiling at 9-8 just because they are in a weaker division and they are not playing against some of the stronger opponents that the Texans are playing against, because for the Colts, the toughest opponents besides the Jaguars are going to be teams like the Bengals, and then after that, you basically have the Steelers. So they're not playing teams like the Jets or the Eagles or the Chiefs, so they're going to have a little bit of runway here. How far are they going to go? That depends on Anthony Richardson. Then you got the Jacksonville Jaguars, the team that came out of nowhere last season. Trevor Lawrence looking real good because he had an actual coach and not Urban Meyer. And on top of that, they added Calvin Ridley. After being laughed at all offseason last year when they overpaid for guys like Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, well, the Jaguars shut up the league real quick because both of those guys did real well. And just watching Calvin Ridley in camp, and I know it's just camp, and all the anticipation of him taking the field and having a monster season, I imagine Calvin Ridley is going to feel like this.
Vindication!
But the point is that offense could be really good. I believe in Travis Etienne, who had a little bit of a rough start to the season last year, but then picked up and played really nicely. I think he could be a feature of that offense. That defense, if they can get after the quarterback more consistently, should be real good. There are some concerns about the offensive line, but nothing like there are for the Jets. And so the Jaguars, I think, are in really good shape. Now, their schedule is not too bad. However, they are playing teams like the Chiefs, the Bills, the 49ers, the Bengals, and the Ravens. Those are going to be their real tough opponents. Now, I do think that they could sweep their division. Maybe the Titans will give them some problems, but I have their floor at 9-8, and I think it's going to be tough for them to lose that many games. Like I said before, those opponents that I just mentioned, they're going to give them a tough time, which is why I have them potentially losing 8 games, but I have their ceiling up at 11-6, which is the highest of anybody in this division. So the Jaguars, their offense, I think, is going to surprise a lot of people. I think they could surpass this ceiling pretty easily if they're able to beat teams like the Bills or the 49ers. But overall, yeah, I think it's Trevor Lawrence season. And finally, you got the Tennessee Titans. Titans, talk about a weird place. Their defensive line is going to be great. We know that that's not going to be a problem. Ryan Tannehill, yeah, it's Ryan Tannehill. They went out and they got DeAndre Hopkins. I know Treylon Burks is dealing with an injury. They still have Derrick Henry, who proved last year he could still be an incredible back. And I think the Titans are going to be competitive this year. The addition of DeAndre Hopkins has really given a lot of hope to Titans fans because they went from, oh, we're just going to be like a middle of the road team to now, hey, we can be contenders, because there's a lot of chaos going on with the Titans. They brought in Malik Willis last year, and then they brought in Will Levis, who I imagine introduced himself to the locker room like this.
She sometimes takes a little pack of mayonnaise and she'll squirt it in her mouth, and then she'll take an egg and kind of, she calls it a mayonnaise. Are you okay?
But the Titans are just in a weird spot, and for me, they have the biggest upside, but their floor is pretty low because they are going against the Jaguars twice, but they also are playing the Chargers, the Bengals, the Ravens. The Browns could give them some tough times. Hell, I think the Saints could be problematic for them. And you just don't know what kind of team they're going to roll out there week 1. So because of that, I actually have their floor all the way down at 6-11. I don't think it's going to be that low because I have their ceiling all the way at 10-7. So that is the biggest upside compared to any other team in this division. It's just a matter of, can the Titans make that offense work? I still don't really get the DeAndre Hopkins signing because even if they make the postseason, I think a team like the Bills or the Chiefs or the Bengals beat them, but let's see what they can do. If they can get out of their division alive, maybe they surprise some people in January. So if we're to take every single team ceiling, that would mean the Jaguars are going to finish in first, the Titans in second, the Colts in third, and the Texans in fourth. But as always, let me know what you think down in the comments below. You know, I saw me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at Tom Grossi Comedy, all social media, see down below. Check out Patcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And a big shout and thank you to all the patrons over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy and the YouTube members. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.